Welcome to Savitha Dental College Lecturecast in Biostatistics. In this session, we shall discuss about the accuracy of a diagnostic test. A diagnostic test is one that is used to determine the presence of a disease. So, a diagnostic test can have multiple results. For example, the test can be positive for a person who has the disease, that's a true positive. The test can be positive for a person who does not have a disease, that's a false positive. The test can be negative for a person with the disease, which is a false negative, and the test can be negative for those who do not have the disease, which is a true negative. So the first parameter we calculate out of this for a diagnostic test would be called the sensitivity of the test, which is nothing but the ratio between the true positive by the total number of people with the disease. And next we can calculate is the specificity of the test, which is the true negative by the total number of healthy people. So sensitive tests are sensitive in the sense they will detect even the mildest form of the disease. They used to rule out the disease, meaning if a sensitive test is negative, you can safely say the person does not have the disease. Whereas specific tests are much more specific for the disease, meaning they are used to rule in the disease. They are used as a confirmatory test to finally say whether the disease is present or not. In a sensitive test, you can have a few false positives but no false negatives. In a highly specific test, you can have a few false negatives but no false positives. So many tests would actually have to strike a balance between sensitivity and specificity. This can be determined by the ROC curve or the receiver operating characteristic. If you look at this, it is plotted between the true positive rate and the false positive rate. In other words, it's plotted between sensitivity and 1 minus specificity. So towards a 0, the specificity is maximum. Towards the right side of the arrow, the specificity is almost 0. So if you look at the green dot, it is at that point the test is very specific, but it has low sensitivity. It can be used as a specificity test. And at the orange dot, the test has become very sensitive, but it has low specificity, meaning it starts having lots of false positives. So usually a diagnostic test is designed such that there is a balance, like the point in the blue dot where the curve actually bends. And to compare two diagnostic tests, we actually try to measure the area under the curve and compare them for two groups. So the next parameter diagnostic test can be used for is to determine the positive predictive value of a disease. The positive predictive value is the ratio between the true positives recorded for the test by the total number of positives recorded in the test. Similarly, the negative predictive value would be the ratio between the true negatives recorded in the test versus the total number of negatives recorded in the test. So the next parameter we look into would be the using the sensitivity and specificity of the test. That is called the likelihood ratio. A positive likelihood ratio is the ratio between sensitivity and 1 minus specificity, and a negative likelihood ratio is 1 minus sensitivity by the specificity of the test. So in other words, positive likelihood ratio is the ratio between true positive and false positive, and negative likelihood ratio would be the ratio between false positives and false negatives and true negatives. And the last parameter would be to determine the diagnostic odds ratio, the odds of the test detecting a disease. So that is the ratio between a positive likelihood ratio and a negative likelihood ratio. And that concludes the statistical tests or statistical calculations around diagnostic tests. Thank you.